We're going to have a look at the newspapers now, French newspapers. Dipty's with us, and we're going to start with Catholic Mass across France yesterday, dedicated, of course, to Father Jacques Hamel, the priest who died just under a week ago, Dipty.
A Sunday of communion, that's how Le Parisien has described that mass showing of Catholics and Muslims all around France yesterday in honor of Father Jacques Hamel, who was killed last week. La Croix is focusing on Pope Francis, who of course was in Krakow yesterday in Poland to lead the World Youth Day, and also urged young Catholics to take a stance to fight against this violence that we're seeing in the world, a message that really resonates with France at the moment.
Now, you found an interesting editorial on where to go from here. This is in La Croix as well, isn't it?
That's right. The Catholic paper does ask that question. Where do we go from now? Now, it wonders, how can we better organize Islam in France to avoid this sort of inbreeding of extremists? What can we do? For instance, there's already been discussions about forbidding foreign financing of mosques, giving imams better training maybe. La Croix is urging that already what we should do is sort of the approved measures that have already been in place should be put in place now. For instance, compulsory training for prison chaplains, as we know that a lot of this sort of extremist idea comes from people do get radicalized in prison. But the papers say it's not, quote, up to the French government to say what Islam should be in the 21st century. That's a question for Muslims. France's role in this is creating better conditions for Islam. After all, Islam is the second biggest religion in France, and it needs to find its place in French society.
Sounds very optimistic, but you found a more cynical piece, haven't you? This is in Le Parisien.
That's right. Le Parisien actually was wondering this morning, was that show, that mass showing in across France yesterday, was that all a facade? In this article, the paper actually reports on yesterday's mass services in the French cities of Évry and Rouen. And one churchgoer in Rouen says that this symbol of fraternity is a, quote, beautiful thing, but what happens tomorrow? Many people don't know how long this sort of show of religious harmony is going to last, and if it will indeed last until, if there will be another attack.
Now, Libération is reporting on another big story from the weekend. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his continuing purges.
The Turkish trap, that's how Libé has called it, this current EU-Turkey situation. Basically, it accuses the EU of, quote, turning a blind eye to thousands of purges in Turkey for fear that Ankara may renege on that very cherished refugee agreement. Now, Libé says nearly 100,000 people have been detained by President Erdogan in the aftermath of that failed coup. He's shut down several media organizations, is considering bringing back the death penalty. He's imprisoned military personnel, judges, journalists, opposition members, anyone he believes may be linked to that failed coup. And yet, Libé says, Brussels and the rest of Europe consider that he hasn't committed the, quote, irreparable, saying that he still has the support of the Turkish people and the opposition. So very critical opinion from Libé this morning.
And in a way, Libé is saying that Turkey actually has the upper hand now.
Turkey has Europe where it wants it. Ankara is holding that refugee policy over the heads of EU leaders, all the while carrying out purges. Now, Libé in its editorial calls this a bras d'honneur, which in French is the French version of sticking the middle finger up at Europe. And this, of course, comes after he told off EU leaders last Friday, telling them basically to mind their own business. And Libé says with these growing tensions between Ankara and Europe, President Erdogan is getting closer and closer to Vladimir Putin, who also is aware that Europe's political force is dwindling at the moment, that it's extremely weakened. And this rapprochement, this sort of growing closeness between the two leaders, Libé says, is quote unquote perilous for world politics.
Now, finally from Dipty, the Olympics, 4 days to go. That countdown really clicking down to the last few days. François Hollande, French president, is heading to Rio to support the French team, but it appears he may also be on rather a campaign of sorts.
That's right. Well, in Rio, Hollande is candidate for 2024. That's what Le Parisien says. Of course, Hollande will be hoping to plug France as an ideal host, well, at least Paris as an ideal host city for the 2024 Games. He'll be actually traveling alongside Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo. He'll visit the athletes' villages when he lands on Wednesday. But one of his main goals will be to, quote, sell Paris as the ideal host city ahead of LA, Rome and Budapest, which are all cities in the running for the 2024 Olympic Games. Now, it won't be an easy task given the incredible concerns for security in France. and the fact that Hollande is facing a lot of problems on the domestic front. But at least the visit to Rio will be a breath of fresh air, a pause from the terrible events of the last couple of months.
Yeah, very true. Paris Olympics 2024. I wouldn't mind myself. There you go. Thank you very much, Dipti. Dipti with the papers on France 24.